Okay, we're starting. Masechet Bava Metzia, daf Mlmd tet.
That's what I should.
Yes, it is. So welcome to Joe, the guest of honor. It's good to have you. So we go through Ein Yaakov, which is the Agadah on the Talmud, and we started this year with Bava Kama. We finished Bava Kama. Now we're in the middle of Bava Metzia. We finished the selections of the Agadah of Bava Kama. Now we're on Bava Metzia. And this week we're going to be talking about, it's not quite in Yana Diyoma, we missed it by a few weeks, but the story where Yosef and his brothers meet each other for the first time after 22 years. And the Torah tells us, Yosef recognized them, they didn't recognize him. We're going to talk about what is behind that encounter. We're going to see it in the Gemara Bava Metzia. There's a teaching about that that's used in the halachic context, but we're quickly going to pivot into what we'll see the main approach of Chazal of trying to understand why the brothers didn't recognize Yosef. And at the end, we're going to try to offer a chidush of maybe a different way to understand what Chazal are trying to teach us. Okay? So let's begin. The Gemara Bava Metzia on daf Mlmd tet Amud Bet says as follows. Mari bar Isak atele acha mibe Chozai. So there was a man named Mari bar Isak, and he had a brother who lived in a place called Beit Chozai who came to him. Amar le plogli. So this brother said to him, split the inheritance with me. I'm your brother, I deserve half of the inheritance. So Amar le lo yadana lach. So Mari bar Isak said to him, I have no idea who you are. So why would I give you half of my inheritance? So until they come for Rav Chisda, they need to figure this out. So Amar le Rav Chisda said, Shapir ka'amar lach. That's great. Shapir ka'amar lach. Shenemar ve'ker Yosef et echav ve'hem lo yikiru. Mלמד שיצא בלא חתימת זקן ובא בחתימת זקן. So Rav Chisda says to this brother, what Mari bar Isak said when he said to you, I have no idea who you are, it's a valid halachic claim. Why? Because you two have spent a long time apart. He lives in Beit Chozai. And in that time, it's possible that he has changed to the point that you have changed to the point that he can claim that he doesn't recognize you or know who you are. And how do we know that? Because Yosef, when he first saw his brothers, he knew them, but they didn't know him. Why didn't they know him? Because when they had first seen him, when they threw him in the pit, so he didn't have a beard. He was 17. But then when they saw him 22 years later, he had a beard, so they didn't recognize him. And so that teaches that there can be instances where a long time passes and a person can not recognize their brother.
It's interesting because there's a medrash that says when he's with Potiphar's wife, the shock that he gets to take him to run away from her is that he sees himself in the mirror and he thinks it's his father.
Right.
Which is crazy. The shock, if anything, they go down to Mitzrayim and there's a guy who looks exactly like their dad who speaks Hebrew, and they're like, no,
they didn't know he speaks Hebrew though.
He did, because he spoke to them in Hebrew.
So we'll see. He had
He put me
at some
point he shows that he speaks Hebrew. Maybe later on he's giving it away.
But also we need to remember he was kind of a king. We don't know how he used to dress as a king.
Good.
Your Egyptian garb is very
good. So good. So take everything you guys are saying, which is great, and frame it as a question on what Chazal just said here.
Why that's the only thing. Without a beard, now a beard.
Yep.
That's all.
Very good.
That's all.
The beard. It's the beard that they don't recognize.
22 years later.
He's sitting on a throne. He looks like a pharaoh. He's got the pharaoh's things. He's speaking in an Egyptian language that they translate. You're telling me it's the beard that's what fooled the brothers. They didn't know who he was.
That's why it's not like. Wait a second. I think that's Yosef. No way, he's a king.
Like every disguise movie, put on the beard,
Super Clark Kent. You know, it's like
someone's in a place of authority though. They don't always they don't always look like who you they really are.
Right. I mean, just the fact that he's sitting on the throne and he's the king, that in and of itself is right. Yeah. So good. That's the question that's going to lead us to what I hope to try to suggest at the end of this year. You're all raising good questions, and we'll see that certain Mefarshim suggest the things that you've suggested. But be that as it may, we're still in the context of the halachic discussion here, which is that Rav Chisda is using this to tell the brother of Mari bar Isak, it's okay that Mari bar Isak says he doesn't recognize you and he doesn't know if you're his brother. Okay,
but it doesn't mean that he's not your brother. That's the point.
It means that you can't come and just say, give me half of your inheritance. He can say, I don't know if you're my brother or not. He says, I don't know who you are because you don't look familiar to me.
Only Binyamin knew who Yosef was.
Only Binyamin knew who Yosef was? Did you learn that at school? Okay, good.
That's the first time I heard it.
Yeah?
I thought it was saying that just because you can't recognize him doesn't mean he's not your brother. Just like by Yosef.
It could be that he's his brother, but the point is that the fact that you come and say he's your brother isn't enough halachically for you to now be able to take inheritance from him. Whether you're objectively his brother or not, you have to prove it, and
What was the
that's
dad?
you coming and saying isn't enough proof. He says, "I don't know who you are." You have to. That's a valid enough claim.
Where was his father? That's the best question.
He's not around. I don't know. Okay, so let's continue. It says, Amar le, zil aiti sadeh de'achuat. So you have to bring witnesses or edim that you're his brother, right? Just saying you're his brother is not enough because he's denying it. So Amar le, so what does the brother say back? It li sadeh, I have witnesses, v'dachali minei de gavra alimahu. But they're afraid to testify because he's a gavra alima. That he's a... I don't know, how do you not that he's violent, but he's like a mobster. You know, he's someone that you know, if you come and testify against him, you don't want to cross him. Okay, so they're scared to come testify against him. He's
careful, my neighbor.
What? So it's like the Godfather, right? So Amar Leili Dideh. So what does Rav Chisda do? He goes now to Mari Bar Isak, and he says, "Zil ant aitisande de lavachufu." So he goes now to the Mari Bar Isak and says, "You bring witnesses that this guy is not your brother." So Amar Le, so Mari Bar Isak says to him, "Dina hachi, that's the halacha. Amotzi mechaver levaraya." What? Some random guy comes and says, "I'm his brother," and then I need to prove that he's not my brother. What kind of system is that, right? So Amar Le, Rav Chisda says back to him, "Hachi dainina lach ulchol ilamed chavrach." This is the halacha for you and anyone who's like you, that's violent and intimidating and a bully to other people. So Amotzi v'chaver levaraya doesn't apply, right? So Amar Le, so he said back to him, Sof sof atu sadeh v'la mesadeh. You can imagine him like laughing when he says this. It's Mari Bar Isak. He says, you know, even if they come, they won't ever testify. Like they'll see me in court and they'll be too afraid. They'll freeze up. So Amar Le, Rav Chisda says, Tarte lo avdeh. If they're already coming to court, so then they'll have the courage to testify. Okay. So again, this is within a halachic context, but the original proof is what interests us, which is this idea that enough time can elapse that a person can validly claim he doesn't even recognize his brother. We'll see another example of this actually in the context, a bit of a tragic context in Yevamot about, let's say a woman is married, and then her husband disappears, and he's presumed dead, and so she goes and remarries, and then the first husband comes back. So what is she supposed to do? So the Mishnah actually says she has to divorce both the first and the second husband in that case. The first one because she's married a second one and been with the second husband, and the second one because the first one is still alive. So the Gemara says, Yevamot Pechet Amud Aleph, Amar Rav. So Rav says this halacha titzeh mizeh u'mizeh, meaning she has to divorce the first and the second one. Lo shanu ela sheniseit be'ed echad, aval niseit al pi shnei edim lo titzeh. So he says that's only true if she married the second one in front of one witness. But if she married him in front of two witnesses, she doesn't have to divorce. So I see your confusion. So what does the Gemara say? Machachu alei b'ma'arava. So they laughed at Rav in the west. In Eretz Yisrael. Why? Ata gava v'kai ve'ata marad lo tetzeh. Whereas the first husband, he came back. He's standing in Beit Din and he's saying, "I'm alive." So you're saying, oh, but she married with two witnesses, the second guy, so she doesn't have to divorce. The first husband never died. You can't...
What does it have to do with the validity of the second marriage?
Exactly, right? That's the question of the Gemara. So the Gemara says, Lo tzricha de lo yadinan lei. So it means, no, it's not that when the first guy comes and you know who he is. It means you're not sure if it's him or not. So then the Gemara says, Ila yadinan lei be'ed echad amay tetzeh. So then if you don't know who he is, so then why should you? In other words, pick your... So lo tzricha de'atu beitrei ve'amrei anan havenan behadade miki nefak ve'ad hashta ve'atunu de la yaditu lei. So it says, no, the case is when there's two witnesses that come in. It's not that the first husband comes back. Two witnesses come back and say, the first husband, you thought he was dead, but he's actually been with us this entire time. Not that he's there in person. And it's you who didn't know who he was. How do we? And the fact that you didn't know who he was is plausible. Why? Dichtiv vayker Yosef techa v'em lekiru v'amar Bava Metzia, Mlmd Shiyatzah belo Khatimat zakan uva b'chatimat zakan. that we see that there can be a case where a lot of time elapses and you don't recognize somebody that you recognized previously. Okay, and again, there's a lot of halachic things that it's not our point for now, but we see here another example halachically where this idea of somebody, a lot of time elapsing, and it can be a very serious, there can be consequences to this idea where if there's a woman who's remarried, and then there's this case of somebody who time has elapsed, you don't recognize him, but he may still be the husband, so there's obvious consequences to that in terms of whether she has to divorce the husband or not. Okay? Good. So let's now explore some of the questions you guys were raising earlier. So if you look at the Rashbam on his Perush on this pasuk in the Torah, Rashbam is always very pshat-oriented in his Perush on So he says, "Vehem lo ikiru," the brothers didn't recognize Yosef. Ki ba'ata lifnei bechatimat zakan. So he quotes first what we saw in the Gemaras, that he had a beard. Ve'od shar'u moshel b'chol ha'malchut. They saw that he was ruling as a king. B'vigdei malchut, he had royal garb. Ve'gam min hakol em lo makirim oto. And he says something actually that none of you had said, which is that between ages 17 and 39, his voice may have changed significantly. And also he spoke through a translator. Okay, there was a translator in between them. So Rashbam lists several reasons why the brothers wouldn't have recognized. They're all very logical and straightforward. Okay? Another reason is actually offered by the rugged Shavar Gaon, who I have never really learned, but I understand he has very kind of esoteric, interesting connections between sugyas. So he quotes the Gemara in Chagiga on Tet Zayin Amud Bet, which has this following teaching: Darish Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Nachmani, Miturgim Menei Doresh Lakish. Okay, so the translator of Reish Lakish darshan as follows: Kol mistakel b'shlosha dvarim einav kehot, bekeshet benasi uvekohanim. Anyone who looks at three things, his eyes go dim.
Dim.
That he becomes hard for him to see.
Why?
We'll see why in a minute. Yes, we'll see why. At a rainbow, at a king, or at Kohanim. So, why a rainbow? So in the first parak of Yechezkel, it talks about this vision of the chariot with Hashem and the Merkava, and it talks about the appearance of Hashem is like the appearance of the rainbow in some sense we don't necessarily understand what that means. So a person should not necessarily look directly at a rainbow because it's reminiscent of the glory of Hashem. Anyone who looks directly at Hashem...
This is why you're not meant to point it out.
Yeah, because of this.
It's interesting. I would think it would be because it represents Hashem wanting to do a mabel.
No, there's no connection.
This is
People
what
keep
also
saying
my
it all the
sisters
time.
learned this in school when they came
It's
out.
not true. It just means you remember. That's all.
It means Hashem wants to do a mabel, now he's not going to do
But
it.
that's
I'm
what
like,
we
no,
learned.
that he said that rainbow is a sign.
I never
that
learned
he will
about
never
it,
know. It doesn't
you
mean every time you see a rainbow,
What?
he wants to destroy the world, he's not going to do
I
it.
know.
Right.
No, it just means
That's
he
the thing they
remembers
teach
the
from the
breeze.
kids.
That's all. They never told me that.
I'm telling you, that's what they teach in schools.
Maybe
They all
in
learn- that's what you
the
learn,
UK
right?
and maybe in
You see, the
Canada.
rainbow means Hashem wants to destroy
You
the world.
both are like the same queen,
But they
so
say
maybe.
like Rav Shimon didn't have a rainbow during his days.
I guess.
Like,
In
like,
Israel, we never
like God
go.
wasn't upset.
I don't know. My
Hashem's saying that a
sisters.
rainbow will be the sign that he would never do a mabel. It doesn't mean every single time.
That's
Rainbow is a
Pashup
physical
Shad.
phenomenon.
You have
Like
to read the Medrash.
every time
Right.
you see
Hey, Shimon, also it rains. Just physical. Come on.
I understand, but it doesn't mean that every time you see a rainbow, Hashem
What's
we
happening
would like to
to-
destroy the world. He won't do it because he promised.
No, I agree with you. It just means he remembers. That's all.
I understand. So why are they teaching kids that when you
I don't know.
like, see a rainbow, it means Hashem's angry with us?
To do tshuva.
In any event,
Because there's a bracha. You're supposed to say a bracha on it, but you're also not meant to put it out.
There's no
So like, if
connection.
you're good or
Shimon.
bad.
You also say
in
Baruch
any event,
Hashem
you're not supposed to
Eloi.
look directly at a rainbow. You guys can continue arguing about the
Why?
education system in England
Why?
another time. So,
Why are you not supposed to?
because it's so beautiful that it's in some way meant to inspire Hashem. So you're supposed to. You can look at it, but
It hurts your eyes.
it doesn't hurt your eyes. It's a phrase which means that you need to be careful and try to avert your gaze and not stare at it intently. Okay. Oh my gosh. Ay, ay, ay. Okay. Benasi dichtiv. The king. You're also not supposed to look at directly. This is what's important for us. Dichtiv v'natatam yadcha alav.
What can?
So that Hashem, he gives some when Yoshua was appointed, I believe. So Hashem describes that you'll get to Moshe, you'll give some of your glory to Yoshua. This idea that the king
The
is invested
bracha
with some
you say-
glory and splendor.
There's a bracha you say now when you see a king, and it's
Yofi. So there you go.
Made on the queen.
So this idea, what's that?
and on the
We
queen.
saw the queen.
And you said
But the
that.
queen is not a king, so it was
You
a
say it
bracha
was a
levatala.
Also, she can't
How
take
about the
heads
7-year-old
off,
me? I
so-
was very excited.
So the idea again is that you shouldn't look directly at a king. There's some kind of splendor there, similar to a rainbow, out of a sign of respect.
You're not supposed to do like this to a king.
That's right. You're not supposed to do
What do you
that.
think Trump would do?
He would do it back to you.
And third, המסתכל בכהנים בזמן שבית המקדש קיים, שהיו עומדים על דוכנן ומברכים על ישראל בשם מפורש. And the idea of kohanim, we're not supposed to look at them directly. We avert the gaze. Again, this idea of the
For you, it's
splendor
not
of
a
Hashem.
problem. For you, it's not a problem.
Right.
What?
Not to look at the Kohanim directly.
That people don't look at kohanim when they do birkat kohanim. Okay, that there's
See how
again this
I'm
idea of
underneath.
the splendor of Hashem at that moment is invested in the kohanim. So what's important? Why am I bringing this, or why did the Rogatchover go and bring this? Because he said perhaps why didn't the brothers recognize Yosef? V'hem lo yikiru, because they averted their gaze because he was a king. That's why they didn't really know who he was. Okay, so they were following this idea. Yeah. Okay. Good. Let's see now, in Breshit Rabbah, it brings this opinion of the Rabbanan, but it also brings another opinion. Vayakar Yosef et Echav v'hem lo yikiru, Rabbi Levi v'Rabbanan. It's actually machloket. Rabbi Levi amar, b'sha'ah she'naflu biyado, vayakar Yosef et Echav, b'sha'ah she'nafal biyadam, v'hem lo yikiru. What does that mean? What is Rabbi Levi saying?
Naflu be'ado, he knew them, but when he fell for them, they just didn't recognize him as his brother. So they didn't give him the midat chesed that he should have between brothers.
Maybe,
Okay.
I think the Shah Nafal Be'adan is like...
Yeah,
17
back
years
in
ago.
Babur.
Back at the ball, yeah. Yeah, when he was 17.
And they didn't know him as his brother. They didn't.
What does it mean, v'hem lo yikiru? They didn't know who he was?
They didn't acknowledge him as.
Balev. Good. Balev. It means, so how's Rabbi Levi understanding lakir in this context?
Didn't treat them like brothers.
Right, they didn't recognize, it's like as though he was a stranger to them, right? Not literally that they didn't know who he was or that they didn't recognize him, but that he was balev, he was a stranger to them. All right, V'Rabbanan understand who shenicha b'chatimat zakan, v'akir Yosef et Echav, v'hem lo yikiru shenichu b'lo b'chatimat zakan. So we're clarifying here when the Rabbanan, when they said, oh, he didn't have the beard and now he has the beard, they didn't recognize him. So the rabbis are understanding le'akir in like the very literal physical sense of they didn't physically recognize his face. And Rabbi Levi's understanding, they didn't recognize him in the sense that they had sold him, they didn't recognize him in a more metaphorical sense, right? And the Midrash Seichel Tov expands on that now. It says, "Mikevan shenemar vayar Yosef et Echav vayikirem, lo tzrach l'shanot v'lomar vayakir Yosef." So the pasuk says twice that Yosef recognized the brothers. Why does it say it twice? Ela lechadesh davar shehem lo yikiru. Right? It's the second time is to come to teach me something new about the fact that they didn't recognize him. Rabbi Levi amar b'shah shenaflu biyado vayakir Yosef et Echav sherichem aleihem. Right? That he had mercy on them. V'kshenafal hu be'adam, but when he fell in their hands back into the pit, hem lo yikiru v'lo yichmu alav. They didn't have mercy on him. V'domel hadavar eni makir avad manos mimeni. It brings psukim of the idea that lehakir can also mean not a physical, like facial recognition, but more of a brotherly recognition. Okay? V'Rabbanan amre hakara mamashi. And here the Midrash is explicit. No, it means literal recognition. הוא הניחם בחתימת זקן, לכך ויקר יוסף את אחיו, והוא הלך בלא חתימת זקן, ובא בחתימת זקן, לפיכך והם לא יכירו. Okay. The Agadat Bereshit adds one more layer to this, where we see another example, like Rabbi Levi in the Midrash, of lahakir being understood in the sense of mercy and brotherly recognition. דכיוון שירדו שבטים למצרים, כיוון שראה אותם, ריחם עליהם. So this Midrash argues, right? We see it says Yosef says he recognized them. Vayitnaker alehem v'deber alem kashot. He recognized them and he's immediately hostile to them, right? So the Midrash says actually when he saw them, his initial instinct was to have mercy on them, an overwhelming feeling of mercy. Shnema vayaker Yosef. So we see here a proof that vayaker is from the lashon of like rachamim. But miyad yarad hamalach v'nir'a Yosef b'dmut ish. והיה אומר לו, על אלו אתה מרחם, אין אתה יודע כמה צרות עשו בך, שהשליחו אותך לבור, ומכרו אותך 4 פעמים. So So then some angel appears to Yosef, disguised as an advisor perhaps, and says, "You're going to have mercy on these guys. Think of all the things they did to you. They threw you in the pit. They sold you, etc." That what spurred Yosef to be hostile to them was not some master plan like the Pshat has, but rather that he was convinced of it by some heavenly agent. Okay, so there's that midrash in of itself. I think there's a lot to say, but the point I wanted to bring is that the idea of le'akir can be seen to mean like have mercy and brotherly love, the way Rabbi Levi understands it, not the way the Rabbanan understood
Why
it.
does it feel a need to understand it in this way, and that he just naturally was angry? Because he holds Hakir means like, recognize he holds like Rabbi Levi.
So if you hold like Rabbi Levi, then you have to understand it this way. But yeah, but what do you? I mean, there's another way to understand. What I would suggest that it portrays Yosef as not that the moment he sees his brother, so
It's natural. It's human.
to feel a sense of mercy. So it's trying to understand
The
that
opposite, to be upset.
to be upset.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a conflict of emotions right in that moment. Okay. The Ramban asks a great question. Okay, the Ramban in his Perush on the Torah,
What is he asking?
he asks the following question. Great. So we had said, according to Chazal, not Rabbi Levi, we'll leave him aside for a minute, they didn't recognize Yosef because he had a beard. So the Ramban says, "V'hem lo yikiruhu klal." They didn't recognize him at all. V'lo tzach od litnaker alehem. They didn't have to then continue to be hostile. Only in the beginning. He was hostile. So Ramban says, why was he hostile? Because he was afraid they would recognize him.
What is hostile?
Hostile means to be mean. So Yosef was initially mean to the brothers. The Ramban says, not because he actually felt any sense of being mean internally, but just so that they wouldn't know who he was. Okay? Ve'amru
I
abotenu
didn't want them
b'ta-
to know
who he was, so that he could do everything that he did.
Maybe he was afraid. I don't know.
ואמרו רבותינו בטעם ההכרה, לפי שהניחם חתומי זקן, והם נקראו שיצא מאצלם בלא חתימת זקן, ועכשיו מצאו בחתימת זקן. So he quotes the Chazal that we saw in the Gemara, and then he says, the Ramban says, והנה יששכר וזבולון אינם גדולים מיוסף רק מעט. So we'll see this explicitly in the Chidushei Geonim in a minute. All 12 of the brothers were born in a relatively short period of time, according to the Psukim. Within a 7-year span, or 14-year span.
We don't know exactly when.
We don't know exactly
Leah
when.
was pregnant. We don't know if maybe one of the other shvachot were pregnant.
Right, but we know that he only married Leah and Rachel after 7 years, and he left after 20 years, and there's 12 brothers that were born during that period.
11.
11, thank you. Right. Yosef was born right when he left.
Benjamin was born.
And then Benjamin was on the way.
That was on the way. So the Ramban says, "V'nei Yisachar Zvulun enam gdelim Yosef rak me'at." So he says, I don't know when exactly, but I know that Yisachar and Zvulun were the last ones born before Yosef. They couldn't have been that much older than him. That's what he
How
says.
much older was Yosef than Binyamin?
I
know that?
don't know. Okay, so he says Yisachar and Zvulun were a little bit older than Yosef, but they weren't, many years older. Aval kevan shikir et hagdolim ikir et kulam. Since Yosef recognized the older brothers, he recognized everybody. What's his question?
He
Wasn't
recognized
the
them.
oldest
Why?
brother?
And they aged the same much as him.
They didn't have beards, right?
Right.
And now they would have had beards. That's what the Ramban is
Who was
implying.
the oldest
No, if
brother?
they don't recognize Yosef because he didn't have a beard when he was 17, so if Yisachar was 18, you have the same problem. So it's because they came in a group of 10 and the older ones were much older and they had beards then, had beards now, so he knows. Okay, so that's how the Ramban answers the question.
How old was the oldest brother?
Reuven, he couldn't have been more than 12 or 13 years older than Yosef. That's what we're learning here.
Presumably they were also speaking
How
Hebrew
much
themselves.
years older
The brothers.
was
Yes.
than
Right.
Yosef?
We'll talk about it after, okay? It's a good question. And he also knew who they were because he figured they would show up. This is kind of like what Joe was saying. Like, even if he looked exactly the same, but like it was so out of context for them, so impossible to think that he was their brother that it would never have dawned on them, even if he didn't look different, let alone that he did.
It's a lesson in how much your own brain can Like if it wasn't a possibility to go open shop, then
Right.
you're never going to see it.
Right.
Your biases.
That's right. Yeah. V'hu shalit al haaretz, right? He was the ruler of the whole land. V'amar Rabbi Avraham, which is the Ibn Ezra. V'yakirem. So why does it repeat that he recognized them and he recognized them? V'yakirem b'tchila yakir shem echav. He recognized that they were his brothers. V'az v'achriken yistakel b'chol echad v'yikiro. And then he recognized, okay, that's Reuven, that's Shimon, that's Levi. Which is nice. So the Ramban is taking this statement of Chazal and he asks a question on it practically, and then he gives his answer to the practical question. We'll see what the Yosef says here, which is I like his logic. So he says, "V'ker Yosef etechav," in his commentary on the. You remember their names? He was 17 when he got sold in the pit. You think at that point, even if a lot of time has passed, he'd remember all his brothers' names. 39, yeah. So he'd still remember his brother's name after all those years, I would think. I know that we sometimes forget your name and your brother's name, but that's different. Okay? Vayaker Yosef etechav. Yeah, I'm almost there. Right? Yeah, once I get there. Ksheyatzah mehem hayu kulam chatumei zakan. So Rashi says, Rashi quotes the same medrash in his Perush on the Torah, and he says, when Yosef left them, they all had beards. That's Rashi's language in his Perush on the Torah. So the Yosef says, "V'hinei Ramban katav v'zeh lashon v'hinei Yisachar zvulun enam gdolim Yosef rak me'at." So at least the younger brothers could have only been a little bit older than Yosef. Aval kevan shekir et gdolim yekir et kulam. That since he recognized the older brothers, Reuven, Shimon, Levi had beards back then too, so he recognized also Yisachar and Zvulun, even though they didn't have beards back then. V'dvarav sotrim the Pi Rashi. Right, so the Yosef says it seems the Ramban in his question and his answers contradicting Rashi, because what does Rashi say? Shayu kulam chatumei zakan. Right, all the brothers had beards. So ve'efshar shema shekatav Rashi kulam lav dafke el rubam kekulam. Right, so when Rashi says in his Perush on the Torah that the reason why Yosef recognized them is because they all had beards when he separated from them, doesn't necessarily mean every single one, just means in general they had beards. וזהו שלא כתב רש"י בכתובות, כולם רק כתב כשפירש בהם כבר היו חתומי זקן. So this medrash also appears in כתובות, and there Rashi doesn't say the word kulam, so the Yosef says maybe that's why you shouldn't be medayik on it, okay? And this is the point that I think is worth highlighting. אבל היפה תואר כתב, וזה לשונו, ואין דברי רמב"ן מוכרחים. What the Ramban says is not a good question. Why? כי לא יחל שיער הזקן לצמוח בכל האנשים בימים שווים. Not everybody starts growing a beard at the same time. כי יש מקדימים ויש מאחרים. Some people grow beards earlier, some people grow beards later. וייתכן שיששכר וזבולון, שהיה להם חתימת זקן בבחרותם. I can certainly imagine that Yosef at 17 was some Ashkenazi, clean-shaven, whatever, and then Yisachar and Zvulun were these Chabadniks with the big beard, even though they were only a year or two older. Right?
Just here.
So then, that answers the Ramban's question. I don't have to go and say because he recognized the older ones, he recognized all of
It
them.
doesn't make sense because they had the same father, even though not the same mother, but
They had different
Hair
mothers.
growth often goes from the maternal father, like grandfather.
Oh,
Or the lack of hair growth, if they have the same maternal grandfather.
Not necessarily the shvachot. Not.
what we learned from here was Rachel was Ashkenazi, and Bilha and Zilpa must have been Edot HaMizrach. That's what we learned,
Like
right?
Lavan?
Maybe, but
I think they were like the Lavan's Pilegish's children.
I'm saying, we must learn from here that Bilha and Zilpa were Edot HaMizrach, and Rachel was Ashkenazi. That's the only way to understand this. Right? Because if it follows the mother, and Yosef was clean-shaven. Okay. Right, so Mashen ken Yosef, ve'im ken efshar sheken svir leil Rashi. So the Yosef, he basically said, the Ramban answers his own question, but the Yosef says it's not even a good question to begin with, because it's possible that different brothers had beards or didn't have beards, okay? I want to see the Chidushei Geonim, because I think it's a really good read. We'll skip the Torah Tamima for a second and go back to it. So the Chidushei Geonim says as follows: שיצא מהם היו כולם חתומי זקן, וקשה, דהת כל השבטים זולת בנימין נולדו באותן 7 שנים אחרות של עבודת יעקב אבינו. נמצא יששכר וזבולון לא היו גדולים מיוסף יותר משנה או שנתיים. Okay, so he assumes it was a year or two. He says right, this is the Ramban's question, framed a little bit differently. ומסתמה לא היו חתומי זקן כמוהו. And he, unlike the Yosef, says, similar to Ramban's question, presumably, Yisachar and Zvulun did not have beards. Now look at his answer. V'nira deshas lo yahiv taima ela ma she'achim lo hikiru et Yosef. Avamal Yosef ikir et echav lo yitzterich taima. So go back to the Gemara for a second, and Bava Metzia daf lamed ten avinav. Okay, so it says, Amar le, right, Shapir kamar lach, right, it's good what Mari Bar Yitzchak said too, Shneimar, vayakir Yosef et echav, vehem lo yikiru. Yosef recognized his brothers, and they didn't recognize him. Melamed Shiyatzah belo Chatimat zakan, uva b'Chatimat zakan. This teaches that Yosef left when they sold it in the pit. He didn't have a beard, and now he has a beard.
It's talking about the lo hikiru.
It's talking about the lo hikiru. It's not saying anything about how he recognized them. Okay, and it's not saying anything about he recognized them. So, if it's not a question of how he recognized them, only that okay, he had a beard, they didn't recognize him. So the fact that Yisachar and Zvulun, even if they had been clean shaven back then and had beards now, that's not what the Gemara is coming to be dorish. Right. So it doesn't matter, right? Because it's not a question of how could Yosef have recognized them if they also were clean shaven and had beards now. Because that's not what Vayakir Yosef et echav. It's not because of the fact that they had beards back then. It's for a different reason. And what's that different reason? The B'midrash Rabbah ka'amar de Yosef gazar shekol mi shenichnas lishbor yichtov shemo v'shem aviv. That Yosef had made a decree. Anyone who's coming to get food has to, they have to write down who they
Background
are.
check.
Right, background check.
FBI, מה זה?
Yeah, security, background
check.
check.
That's why he tells them, אתם באתם לגנוב את הארץ.
Right, because he already knew who
from
they.
different places, you're big and strong.
Yeah, that's the midrash here. Exactly. You're coming. That each one of them went in through a different gate. Exactly. Very good. וכיוון שבאו בני יעקב, כל אחד נכנס בשער שלו, לכתבו את שמותם, ולערב, and in the evening, הביאו לו את הפתקים. So they used to bring to Yosef, like these are the people that came today, from all the different gates. זה קורא ראובן בן יעקב, וזה קורא שמעון בן יעקב, וזה קורא לוי בן יעקב. ועוד כיוון שקצתה חדומי זקן, היו בשעה שיצא יוסף. Basically he says, ויקרא יוסף את אחיו. How did Yosef know who they were? Because he had gotten a report that they had showed up. והם לא הכירו, but how did they not recognize him? Because he didn't have a beard. So the whole question of the Ramban falls away if you understand that the Gemara is not trying to answer that question. So that's what. So it's good. I like the Chidushei Gonim a lot. The problem with his answer is, if you remember, we looked in Bereshit Rabbah. So we saw in Bereshit Rabbah a machloket between Rabbi Levi and the rabbis, and Rabbi Levi said he recognized them berachamim, and they didn't recognize him because they were cruel to him. And the rabbis, if you look at the language in Bereshit Rabbah, v'Rabbanan Amrei, hu shenicham Chatimat zakan vayakir Yosef et echav. That the language in the Bereshit Rabbah seems to go in both directions. So I think if this is already if you look at the Chidushei Gonim, he says Venira deshas lo yayiv taima, that he's being medayek that the Gemara brings it. It doesn't need to explain Vayakir Yosef et echav, but the version of the Ramban. And the Ramban is coming, but the version of that Medrash in Bereshit Rabbah does apply it in both directions, in which case the Ramban's question would apply.
Right.
Okay, so there's like a lot of diukim here, but I think it's all like very sharp. I want to conclude with the following. Okay, the Baal HaTurim has a perush on the Torah where he brings like gematriot, and he brings kind of these hints to stuff, and he also brings, if there's a phrase or a word that appears very infrequently in the Tanakh, he'll say this only appears in this one or two other places, and then he'll draw a connection between those places based on the fact that this word in this exact formula only appears in these places. So he says, Vehem lo hikiru, this phrase, Vehem lo hikiru, bet b'mesora, it appears twice in Tanakh. Okay? Here, by the brothers. Ve'idach gabe Iyov, vayiru oto merachok velo hikiru. That after Iyov was punished and it was full of boils and his body was all right, and after Hashem punished him, before he starts his whole kind of rant, so he has three friends who come to visit him. They see him from far away. They don't recognize him because he was such a nevach. Ma hatam lo yikiru b'shvil shenishtana mechemat yisurim. So there, he had changed because of the suffering he had gone through, like his physical afflictions. Afkan lo yikiru b'shvil shenishtana. And here, the brothers didn't recognize Yosef because he had changed. How so? So he doesn't bring the point of the beard, just the fact that he had gone from being a slave to a king, it changed him, his appearance.
Who became from a slave to a king?
Yosef.
How? When was he a slave?
That's the story in Bereshit. I'll catch you up on it after. Yeah. Okay, he was in the pit, and then he was in jail. Umiu hatam lo yikiru merachok. The difference, though, between Iyov and Yosef is that Iyov, they didn't recognize him from far away. Aval k'shekaravu elav yikiru. But when they got close, they did, because then they started talking to him. V'hacha, but here by Yosef, lo yikiru klal, they never recognized him. Shelo elu al da'atam shegi Yosef l'malak hazeh. They never thought he could reach this point. Okay,
Which means Eve's friends thought that maybe he could
that he could
reach such a low level.
He could reach a low level, perhaps. Yeah, right. You could read into the Balatum because really, not to go on a whole thing about Sefer Eov, but the friends are not such good friends. But so,
Right.
right there are things that maybe you are a bit of a Russia, right? There, at least that's one line of argumentation that they have of why he got punished. So it means that they had some right. Okay, good. Now, what I want to argue, and with this we'll close, is everything that we've seen so far understood. I'll go back to the question that we asked in the beginning, right? We said that the brothers didn't recognize Yosef because he didn't have a beard, and then he had a beard. And then we said, and Kobe asked the question, but also he was a king, and also he had the clothes, and also he spoke with a translator. Why are Chazal focusing on the fact that he had a beard as the main thing that was why they didn't recognize him?
I think one of the things that Bereshit Rabbah is saying, "Hinichan בחתימת זקן, שהניחו בלא חתימת זקן." I think what they're saying, we saw Yosef when he was a slave, they threw him into jail, they shaved him. So maybe also he was shaved by his brother. When they threw him into the...
שלא בחתימת זקן.
So it's like, he looked like a nebech. And all of a sudden you see a king, you see someone like a יפה תואר. As they say, there's no way there's Yosef, there's no way that's the same brother that we...
Okay, good. So
shaved him and threw him into the bowl and did whatever he wanted to.
Okay, so you're saying that the Belo Chatimat Zakan is just a way of saying that there's no way that this changed.
No, he had a beard that just shaved his beard.
All right, so they physically shaved his beard, you're saying? Still.
Yeah, because I'm saying, why wouldn't they say Bereshit Rabbah דווקא שהניחו בלא חתימת זקן? זה שהניחו.
Okay. Yep.
That's what I think. It's the same thing. בור ובור שם בשני המקומות, וגילחו אותו לפני ששמו אותו בכלא. אז אני אומר, אולי גם גילחו אותו לפני זה. אולי ככה מכרו עבדים פעם.
יכול להיות. סביר להניח.
כאילו זה, it's a way of like...
ואז בעצם הם מגיעים פתאום למצרים, כן, כי זה עבד, ואז פתאום מגיעים למצרים, ורואים איזשהו מלך, עם זקן יפה, ואני מניח גם טלטלים אומרים שהיה לו...
כל זה מאוד קשה לי אבל, כי אנחנו יודעים כאילו מהמקורות ההיסטוריים שלנו, שאנחנו יודעים, מצרים לא גידלו זקנים. לא גידלו שיער, לא גידלו זקן, היו קינים, לא גידלו בזה. זה לא אמיתי. It was
no, the pharaohs.
The pharaohs had it was an ornament. It wasn't
right.
A jewelry.
I'm agreeing.
It does say that Cleopatra wore a fake beard though.
רגע,
She wore a fake
כשמוציאים
beard.
את יוסף מהבור ויגלחו
She didn't get respect.
ומתגלח.
But which is interesting because if they didn't grow beards, then why would the one
They
woman?
didn't go beards. It was ornamental beards. It was.
So okay, so
So maybe the whole thing is
He's not he's one of us.
so good. So I want to say three things, okay? Number one, Kobe, to your point, I just raised the thought that you said that maybe they shaved him. So if that's true that they shaved him and threw him in the pit, that's another way to dismiss the Ramban's question.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the Ramban said
had a
Yosef
beard,
was
right?
clean shaven. It could be that Yosef had a beard, but he was shaven, and that's the last image they had of him. So it's another way to answer the Ramban's question, if you take that literally. To your point, it could be Khatimat Zakan, could mean this instead of a beard, right? It could be that a symbol of the royalty instead of the pharaonic thing. And the third thing I want to say is to offer my own chiddush on this, which is the following. This whole context is Vehem lo hikiru, they didn't recognize him. But the truth is, this isn't the first time that we have a context of somebody not recognizing somebody else in the Torah when they should. And when, what's the first
This is the
example?
first time.
Without cheating.
I read it already, so I won't ruin it.
Okay. Without cheating. Because the Baal Turim says, Vehem lo
It's also got to do
hikiru
with
only
hairs.
appears twice, here and by Iyov.
So we
Also
have
got to do with hairs. That's
But there's a
what's so cool.
slight, what?
זה גם קשור לשיער, נו? תחשוב.
Well, that's the chap.
I know.
Okay? Yaakov goes to Yitzchak, dressed up as Esav.
very good.
Okay? Yaakov goes to Esav, says, let me touch your arms. And it says, V'lo ikiro, okay, this last source. V'lo ikiro, ki ayu yadav, ki de Esav achiv seirot vayvarchehu. How does Yaakov get the bracha? Because he pretends to be Esav by putting hair on himself so that Yitzchak doesn't recognize him. Does that sound familiar? Right? The brothers don't recognize Yosef because he didn't have hair and now he has hair. It's a thematic point that Chazal are making. Whether he had the beard or not the beard, the physically, the shaving, that's not the point. The point they're making is that the way Yaakov got the bracha, got to Gdula, was that he had to adopt the identity of Esav. In the physical sense of putting on hair, and also in the sense of becoming duplicitous, becoming somebody who wasn't the Ishtam Yoshev Olim anymore, but somebody who was willing to do things a little bit not so kosher in order to get what needed to be done. And that's what the Se'al represented. He wore the Se'al, so when Yitzchak didn't recognize him, it wasn't just literally because of the hair, but also because Yaakov doesn't act like, this isn't the Yaakov I know, right? He isn't somebody who puts on hair and deceives his father. So when the brothers velo ikiru, by saying now he has a beard, it's saying Yosef was this little pisher, 17-year-old brother. This is a way of saying it never lo alal datam, like in the language of one of the midrashim that we saw, that lo alal datam, that he could ever become the shalit shel haaretz, but not in the sense that they didn't recognize like that they had a camera that scanned his face and the beard, they couldn't put the pieces together, but that the beard represents that he is somebody who now is cold and calculating and has master plans and is second to the paro and he's in charge of this whole world. That's not the Yosef that we knew when we sold him into Egypt. So I think that's what Chazal are really trying to teach, that Yosef is carrying on the tradition of Yaakov, that he was really the Ben Skunim of Yaakov in the sense, Ben Skunim, Zakan, I like that, I just thought of that myself, that he inherited the mantle of Yaakov in the sense of donning, when necessary, a disguise of hair in the sense of needing to adopt an identity in order to further the mission of Bnei Yisrael and of Am Yisrael, and the brothers didn't recognize that that's who he had become. And so that's perhaps what Chazal are really trying to teach here.
So I think that's what they say about the Ben Skunim, what it means. Try to find
Say it again? That's...
Ben Skunim is because of the same beard. I think that's what they're saying in the page.
Oh, wow. That would be great.
I
That would be mechavim to something I didn't even know.
Wow.
How does it work with the Bereish Rabbah who says
In both directions? It doesn't. But that's why I brought the Chidushei Gonim, is that maybe in the Shas you could interpret it that way. But yes, in Bereshit Rabbah and in the Midrash Seichel Tov, it's harder to understand it that way.
They're already elevated.
Yeah. No, that the brothers didn't change fundamentally. You could actually fit it in. You could say the brothers were the same. They were them back then, and they were the same here. Or at least that was how Yosef initially thought they were.
Didn't see them as any different than the people that threw them.
That's what it is. That's what it is. They had changed, right? Because now they, protected Binyamin and they did Shuvah. But from Yosef's perspective, they were the same people. Mm-hmm. And from their perspective, he was a totally different person.
That's why you had to play the games. You had to make sure that they weren't those conniving people that threw him in a pit.
So he had to connive.
So it actually does fit nicely with the Bereshit Rabbah when you understand it that way.
Rashi says, "Shaya zivi kunin shelo domer." It's the same face, the same.
Had the same face as Yaakov, right? That's what you said.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted to get back to what you said about with the face, right? That he was like his father's face. It ties to this idea, and that we're trying to suggest now, perhaps.
Like the same personality, the same character.
Yeah, meaning the idea they looked in the window and he saw his father, right? So the idea is, okay, Pshat, he saw his reflection, but it could be that he recognized something about like him being like his father. Then that his father's influence is what deterred him from being with Eshet Potiphar versus the physical image of his father.
Recording.
Yes. Do you want me to stop it so you can say something?
I want to finish